Welcome to the Teach Better Talk podcast, your official podcast for the Teach Better Podcast Network, the hub for all things education, brought to you by teachbetter.com. The Teach Better Talk podcast is committed to answering your burning questions through a variety of lenses and bringing new offers to you and your colleagues to help you thrive throughout the school year. My name is Ray Hewart, and we love your questions here on the pod. If you have any questions that you'd love us to consider as topics for future episodes, please share them with us by emailing info@teachbetter.com. Our topic this week is all about being thoughtful with AI. We want to ensure that AI is a tool that we are embracing in the best of ways, not being fearful, but also not making those silly mistakes that we know many of us are terrified to make. We have an expert here with us, but before we get to any of that fun, I want to give a huge shout out to a member of the Teach Better team, Joshua _Stamper. Josh is an expert in so many things, including trauma-informed work, and we so appreciate him on the team. It's always nice when we're able to celebrate the work he's doing and always making us look good with his video and podcast editing skills. If you are not listening to Josh's podcast over on any of your favorite podcasting platform, that is called Aspire to Lead. Wonderful for potential and future leaders that you yourself identify as, or have a friend or colleague that you want to point in that direction. As we dive into leadership in an AI realm, we have an incredible guest here with us. I'm so appreciative that you are here and willing to share your thoughts this afternoon.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
You know, I know there are so many things we're going to be able to dive into, but before we get too far in, do you mind sharing a little bit about yourself, introducing yourself to the Teach Better family?
Sure. My name is Aron Boxer, and I'm based out of Greenwich, Connecticut. My company is called Diversified Education Services, which, as it says, it's an education services company. It's myself, and I have a team that works for me. We all have a special education background, and we are executive functioning coaches and learning specialists. And we work with a pretty vast population of students, anywhere from early primary grades all the way through college. And we also work with adults as well. The main focus is executive functioning. So working on those nonverbal skills and using the content that students are learning in school to teach the skills. And then for adults, working on those life skills, the organization, the time management, the planning, and some of those areas that prevent people from being successful. So essentially, we're taking people that are really bright or have a lot of potential and have them try and get to a different place, maybe some areas that have been holding them back due to some type of executive dysfunction.
We have so many things we're going to be able to dive into, especially how AI is supporting you and the work that you're doing. But before we get too far in, how did you get into that space? That seems like a very specialized space, and owning a business is extremely hard. What brought you into doing this work full time?
Well, it's been a long path. I certainly didn't imagine myself in this career growing up, for sure. I never imagined I wanted to be an educator. In fact, I wanted to work on Wall Street. That was always a thing because I grew up in this town where there's a lot of excesses, and I came from more of a middle background at most. And growing up in a place like this where there's so many masters of the universe and captains of industry, I aspired to be that, and I wanted to work hard and get there. But my mom was in a similar field as me. She worked in a school. She became a private tutor, and then she made that her main venture. It worked from home, so I always had a lot of kids, even people that I knew from town, coming to my apartment and then my house. And I don't know if it rubbed off on me a little bit, but I was always really good with my executive functioning skills. That was always a strength, and I did well in school. I definitely struggled maybe around those teenage years, but there was a point where I just had no interest in being part of education. And then a couple of things happened along the way. I was motivated in some different ways that I wouldn't have expected, and after I graduated from college, I worked in financial services, and I strongly disliked it. I was like a fish out of water. It didn't make any sense. All I wanted to do was I wanted to help people. It was just an instinct in me. And I remember after I got laid off in the 2008 financial crisis, I went and I interviewed to be a headhunter. And the woman said, "Why do you want to be a headhunter?" And I talked about, well, the nobility of helping someone find a job. And she cut me off in the middle of the interview. And she said, "Whoa, whoa, whoa. We're not here to help people. We're here to sell." And I was like, "Thank you very much." Got up, walked out. And I said, "All right, I need to rethink things." And after I gotten laid off, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was in a bunch of debt, because I was working in New York City, and I just, dealing with all the excesses of living there. I was always into physical fitness, and I would belong to an MMA gym. And after I left that field, I told my sensei, I said, I need to cut some costs, and I can't come here anymore. And he said, "I'll tell you what, if you help me out with the kids' classes, you can come here for free." So I said, "Great." And the first day I was helping out with the little kids, they're like 7 or 8 year olds, and some of them are like bouncing off the walls and misbehaving. And I just gravitated towards them, and I loved it. It was like the most fun I had ever had in my life. And I got that feeling like, oh, I like helping people. And I like these kids that were like me, because I was the one who was bouncing off the walls for years. And then, putting together, like, my mom was in this field, and now, I'm entering a part of my life where I need to make some changes. And I enrolled in graduate school, and I started down the path of special education. I got my certification, got my master's, got a job teaching in schools. And all along the way, I started tutoring. My mom was sending me clients because she was a very well-respected name. She introduced me to her contacts, and I did a really good job for them. And then I met more people, and then my business grew. And then it was more of like a homework helping service, right? Using my special education background. And then I realized that I really had an affinity for helping the type of kids that didn't necessarily need just enrichment, but the ones who were like super bright, but they weren't reaching their academic goals. And I realized that some of them, it wasn't about the content. It was about those nonverbal skills, the time management, the organization, just being completely disheveled, and how much that impacted their ability to be successful. So, through my education background, my schooling, and through my professional experience, I kind of married those together with personal experience as well of my own path. And I just kind of, monetized and came up with a system that really worked. And then it just became where people started referring families to me where they needed executive functioning help. And that's how I got my name out there. And it expanded into working with adults. It expanded working with college students, and it really just took off. And what I realized during all this was, it's not necessarily what I want. It's what I'm good at. And I had an inherent, set of skills that I wanted, and I knew that I had, but I didn't know how to kind of go about it. And putting it, towards a business, and putting it in a one-on-one setting was so much better for me and better for the people that I worked with. And that's where I am today. It's been 15 years, since I changed careers, and I haven't looked back since.
Executive functioning is the concept that so many educators not only became more familiar with, but became very passionate about during COVID. I know that your passion for it was far before that, but what tips and tricks have you found working with educators now that you can share to help support the enhancement of that skill?
That's a good question. So it's an unregulated field, right? To call yourself an executive functioning coach, you can go on the internet and become a certified lion tamer, right? By paying some organization that sounds really fancy, right? So because I have some type of flexibility, right? I'm a certified teacher, special education, K through 12. I have a master's degree. Like, I have, the initials, I have the background. But what I really learned was on the job, right? And working with people, trying certain things, and making sure that I wasn't getting stuck in a box, right? I don't have this proprietary book that I open up and say, all right, page 1 of executive functioning is this, right? Everyone is different. There's a saying where if you've been doing it that way the whole time you're probably doing it wrong, right? So it needs to constantly evolve, but remembering that executive functioning is all about fundamentals, right? It doesn't need to be fancy. It doesn't need to be color coded necessarily. I mean, color coding is great. But, like with I always give the analogy about a chef. A chef doesn't take out one ingredient at a time, right? Or one measuring cup. They take out their ingredients. They have their measuring cups. If they even need to look at a recipe, they have that, and they start going step by step and piecing it together, right? My students, a lot of them that I meet with, they're taking one ingredient at a time, or they're trying to bake the cake, without the ingredients and trying to, feed that to people. And so it's developing a relationship and remembering the fundamentals is a huge part of this. And just remembering that it might be simple skills that we're trying to teach, but for some it's really difficult. But at the same time, we also need to be outside the box and adapt to each individualized student. It's not about just this overall approach that's going to work for everybody.
Yeah, no, I know a lot of educators will fully agree and be nodding their head as they're listening to this. As you think through how that connects to your passion now for AI, where do you see that connection happening?
Well, like a lot of people, the AI, I'd heard about AI, right? In fact, I used AI without even realizing it. Like Grammarly, had some form of AI. Chatbots, accessing chatbots, was part of AI. And one of my students wrote a paper, which I thought almost sounded like paranoid, like a Terminator Matrix, like, the world's coming to an end because of AI. And I was like, eh. And then ChatGPT 3.5 came out, and I was just shocked about the capability. And I was so surprised. And, I have about 30 people that work for me, and I'm in contact with all of them and trying to find out their perspectives. Like, hey, are you using this? Are you familiar with it? And I don't think anybody realized. And so, like a lot of educators and people outside the education field, we're learning on the go. We're learning about how to use it. How do I use it? I mean, the practical piece. It's a great way to cut down on some of the kind of mundane, administrative tasks that can be really laborious, and cut down on the time that we're working on that and focus on the instruction, right? And bring ways and how we can incorporate that into the instruction. And I use ChatGPT, and I pay for the Omni, the 4.0, because it's vastly better than even the 3.5. But trying to keep up or even stay ahead of where it is, because whoever's going to use AI for the first time is going to use the worst version they've ever used in their life, because it's growing so quickly. So, using it to create practice tests, using it for administrative tasks. So it's in addition to the process, and also helping the kids with the product, and then the back room way in which we use it. I would say that there's not one day that I go without using AI. And although I am using it, and the people that work for me, they have their own ways, I'm not telling them how to use it, because we're all trying to figure this out. I think that some of the schools in this area, namely Fairfield County is where Greenwich is, and Westchester County is right next door. We're right outside of New York City. They're not using it. If they are using it, it's to a much limited capacity. But if anything, we're where we are at the beginning of calculators or the internet or Wikipedia, which is banning it or taking a punitive approach to it. Like by the end of the year at the local high school here, they had it banned, right? Because we gave this amazing revolutionary tool to young people, and as human beings, we're always going to take a shortcut, right? My job is to help people do the least amount of work to get the best result, right? That's what we do. And so figuring out which is cheating and which is just leveraging the tools, this is like almost like an existential crisis and an exciting time, to figure out how and where we're going to use this. I have numerous stories I could share with you, but I will just say that this is a time where we've kind of have like kids, if they don't have a license, and then giving them the keys to the Lamborghini and they don't know how to drive and saying, all right, just go out there. And, you know, some of them might be really great at navigating and some of them might crash into a wall. Right. And I think that the punitive approach that schools are taking, trying to scare kids into not using it, is almost opening kids' eyes to say, wow, there's something really here. What can I do to use it and not get caught, instead of how can I use this to promote learning? How can I use this to increase my critical thinking skills? Because right now, unless there's a professional who's working with them or an educator who has an understanding of how to use it, kids are not using it effectively. Right now, it is the number one cheating tool. That's it.
We're going to keep with this conversation discussing how to be thoughtful with AI. If you yourself have questions that you want to post to our community, feel free to participate as you are listening to the pod and watching over on YouTube. We'll be right back. Quick pause to talk about the Teach Better Academy. Are you a member of the Teach Better Academy? For $9 a month, you can get access to over 40 courses that are specialized and designed for teacher leaders all across the US and Canada. These not only show you how to break down standards, bond with all of your students, design the best leadership plan, work with teachers with varying personality types, learn more about co-teaching, and anything in between. As you scroll through the Teach Better Academy, you'll see a number of courses that are all asynchronous for your learners and also give your teachers certified credit and badges for the work that they accomplish. Head over to teachbetter.com to learn more about the Academy, or just to look at the courses, both free and full workshops, and go explore. How can we continue to be thoughtful with our AI usage, whether it be teaching our students how to use the tool effectively or exploring ourselves and helping with those tasks to make us as efficient and effective as possible? We are here with Aron diving into this concept. And Aron, I know there's so many different directions we could take this conversation. What do you feel like is going to be most helpful for our Teach Better community listening, full of classroom teachers and administrators from around the world, looking to be more thoughtful with AI?
Again, that's a really good question. And I think one of the most important things that we can do is look above, look to the people who are in positions of authority, policymakers, and say, hey, at least in Connecticut, let's speed this up, right? We have this revolutionary tool, and that if we don't figure a way to use it effectively, then we can't teach our students how to use it effectively, because the education system is very antiquated, right? You go back to the Industrial Revolution, right? So much has changed in this world over the last 130 years, and the education system hasn't changed very much. We've made advances in how to make the curriculum a little more accessible, right? I know growing up, especially in like the math and science classes, it was teachers write on the board, we write in our notes, we take a test. For the most part, there's been a lot of advances. Maybe the pendulum's shifted a little too far in another direction when we talk about project-based learning, right? With a little bit less of that universal design for learning, and not being able to access kids who might learn a little bit differently, coming from a special education background. But this tool, like I said, anybody who uses it for the first time is going to be using the worst version. And the best way that we can get something in place and be able to help our students is if we have some type of framework, right? Instead of just winging it, right? Which needs to happen at some point, right? Because the states don't have anything, at least around here, that I can tell that they're handing down. And I don't see it being used in classrooms. At the college level, even, I see tons of syllabi from private institutions, public institutions, top tier institutions, and ones that are, kind of middle of the road. And they'll always address AI most of the time from a punitive approach. And then you'll have someone else who will say, you can use AI, but they don't tell them how to use it. There's almost this expectation, like sometimes I even have, where, oh, you're young, you must know how to use this. When people are using AI for purposes that to avoid learning, right? That's a huge problem. So I think that if we can get and implore the people that are in positions of power to say, all right, let's all put our heads together. Let's get educators from different walks of life, different communities, different levels of education, and let's put us in a room and knock some ideas around. Maybe get some people who created this, right? Create some partnerships with the people who created ChatGPT. Sal Khan. I'm a huge fan of him and what he's done and what he's brought to the education community and what he offers. Everyone who's in a private institution obviously is going to have some type of buy-in, from a business perspective of what they want to bring to the table. Regardless, it doesn't even matter. We need to have something, but we can't avoid it. It's here. The toothpaste can't get back in the tube, and again, we need a framework.
Yeah, it's interesting. I actually see AI being used quite frequently in terms of educators using it to lesson plan, using it to brainstorm differentiation options, and many of which I know in workshops, we mentioned this a lot with the Teach Better team, is using AI to start the conversation, allowing students to be critical of what is produced and then have that feedback. Is that the kind of work that you're challenging educators to do in terms of your thinking, not only to lean on our state and national figures to create, the term you used, I think, was a framework, but also explore themselves and find ways between their own brainstorming and the thoughts of their colleagues to utilize it on a daily basis in the classroom?
Yeah, what you mentioned, because you have the classroom setting, and what we do is we do personalized learning and individualized setting using systematic explicit instruction, right?
Of course.
We're not just following a curriculum and then assessing. Like, this is it's almost like an SEL component to what we're doing. So AI can be used, as you pointed out, to create lesson plans, to create objectives, to create SMART goals, right? The fundamental piece, let's say for teachers, we'll stick with them for a moment, right? There's a fundamental way in which you create a lesson. You have the learning objectives, you have activities, then you have to assess student learning to make sure everyone's kind of on the same page, right? You sequence the lesson in some type of meaningful manner. And then you have the wrap up. You have your closure to make sure everyone kind of got the lesson. My question would be for educators in a traditional classroom setting is how can you include AI, right? Does AI take the place of something, or are we bringing it in to all steps, to certain steps? I know there's a school in Texas who's gone way deep into it, where they have kids who, for the first 2 hours of the day, they sit in a booth and they have their personalized AI tutor, and then they get their social emotional piece from for the remaining 6 hours of the day, where they're interacting and learning how to conduct life skills, right? So, there's certainly ways that you can incorporate it into the classroom for our purposes, for what we're doing with kids, because we're working on a lot of strategies and skills, and we're not creating a curriculum, but we're trying to take the curriculum that the teachers are giving to students and almost acting like the AI tutor, except we're in person. AI will never take the place of the charisma and the independent thought that a human being has, right? And it shouldn't take the place of teachers. I think that when teachers figure out how to use it is to make sure that they're not doing the teaching, right? Is the teacher needs to do a lesson, but also figuring out where to fit in the AI. So if we have 15, 20, 25, even 30 kids in a classroom, and there's one teacher in the front, especially if we're in a middle school or high school classroom, a standard classroom, not what we call a collaborative classroom where there's a special educator in the room roaming back and forth through the aisles. If we have a traditional classroom and we have AI, there is a potential, because we have in a lot of the schools around here, or most of them, the infrastructure with everyone having a device to have that individualized, personalized learning go on in the classroom to supplement what the teachers are actually teaching, but not necessarily taking the place of. So for the kids who need differentiation and they need accommodations, they need even modifications, whether or not they have an IEP, or a 504 plan, right? But to have something that can interact with them and meet them at their level. And, we always talk with teachers about, differentiate the instruction, for the students that may be more profoundly disabled. We might actually finally have a tool that can help them not feel like they're lost in the classroom and they're staring off into space, because I'll tell you, working one-on-one with students, they can't stare off into space. It's only us and them. It's just one-on-one, right? And I think AI could have the potential to really help the population of students that I know most about, the kids with ADHD, high functioning autism, learning disabilities, and other disorders that make the classroom, the traditional antiquated classroom, just really intolerable for some.
It's very interesting, and I love the challenges and the thoughts that you are hoping to leave our community with, of looking at the reflection of their classroom and seeing where AI can be incorporated. I know many members in our Teach Better community are working towards or currently working within a mastery-based classroom. So a lot of these resources that AI can produce can drastically help you with that. We'll be right back for some major takeaways. As we wrap up today's conversation discussing how to be thoughtful with AI, I do want to make sure we give you some helpful takeaways. Aron, if you were to identify a tactical takeaway that we can give our community, an action step that they can go do right now, what is something that we can challenge them with as we wrap up our conversation here?
Working with kids, I think that getting caught up in the day-to-day of, I got to get through this curriculum, right? I mean, it really depends on the time of year. It depends on what class you're teaching, the population, what type of school you're working with. And I think if keeping it consistent with kids, and I always like to say, say what you mean what you say, but don't say it meanly, right? Kids are constantly challenging us, right? And we have our lives that go on outside of school, right? But when we're there, we represent someone who's really important, right? We have a role that we're entrusted with kids to help them, reach their goals. And just remembering that because we have that responsibility to, when we're sitting in the front of a class, we're not just teaching to a group, we're teaching to a group of individuals. And the best way that I have learned is to just get to know them, take the time, even if it's like a 2-minute conversation, of getting to know them on an individual basis, which might not always be feasible. And some might not even be receptive, but most kids that I talk to, they don't say how much they love their teachers. And, I even remember being a student and being like, I would say I would like a teacher if they were nice. If they weren't nice, I didn't like them, right? And showing just a little bit of interest, I think, goes a really long way. And as frustrating as it can be to be a teacher, and sometimes it could just be exhausting. But if I have a relationship with a student where I feel like they're valuing me and they feel like I value them, I will have a lot better opportunity to make progress than any AI tool or any fancy technological device. It comes down to that interpersonal relationship. If I can remember that, then I have a really good chance of helping kids, reach their goals, and also feel like, remember, like, I do this because it makes me feel good to help people. So getting to know kids is really important.
So many wonderful conversations to be had around AI and how to continue to use it in a strategic and smart way. Please feel free to continue to send your questions over to our community, especially those of you using our Facebook group, which is a great spot to post those questions, with over 8,000 educators from around the US and Canada sharing their thoughts. Aron, thank you so much for being on the show, sharing your insight. And friends, if you have made it this far in the podcast, then we would really appreciate if you wouldn't mind taking a moment to review, subscribe, and do all the things that help us connect with our community. Aron, thank you again so much for being a part of this conversation.
Thanks for having me.